Yate, good morning, Shay Yapapilian, as in a share. Trabahanishnet Lazatlan Bashas chain, Kaidanaida Shinalo Dashache. Welcome and thank you for joining us this morning as we continue our educational campaign on the topic of human trafficking, awareness and prevention. In honor of Navajo Nation Human Trafficking Awareness Month, the Office of the First Lady and Second Lady has been hosting virtual webinars aimed at providing information and resources to prevent human trafficking in our tribal communities. Last week, we had presentations by Restoring Ancestral Winds. They provided a preview of the types of trauma one can experience and provided a framework of healing from the Nez scholars, healers, and knowledge holders. And we also had a presentation by Matthew Holgate, a student at Vanguard University, who provided a presentation on Human Trafficking 101 with a message to youth. Today, we will hear from Thomas Aliberti, Assistant United States Attorney and Tribal Liaison for the District of New Mexico, who will provide a session on combating human trafficking from a law enforcement perspective. We will close out the presentations this Friday, January 28th, with a virtual self-defense demonstration by the Navajo Division of Public Safety. As we enter the final week in January, I encourage you all to tune in and listen in on the remaining sessions. These sessions provide a general overview of what human trafficking is. It is our hope that you will take this information to raise awareness and to teach within your homes, workplaces, and communities. If you missed any of the sessions or would like to rewatch, you may access the recordings at Navajo Nation OPVP Communications on their YouTube channel. Visit our website at www.nnoflsl.com or our mobile app for more information on events and our partners. You may download our app at the Apple Store or Google Play Store. At this time, I would like to introduce our special guest representing the state of New Mexico. Thomas J. Aliberti is an Assistant United States Attorney and Tribal Liaison for the District of New Mexico. After graduating from the University of Maine School of Law, Thomas joined the Criminal Division of the Alaska Department of Law, serving as a prosecutor in Bethel, Alaska. His office served 64 Alaska Native communities on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and handled cases involving homicide, domestic violence, sexual abuse of minors, and sexual assault. Thomas then joined the Alaska Department of Law's Office of Special Prosecutions, where his chief responsibilities were to prosecute statewide child sexual exploitations and human trafficking. In 2018, Thomas joined the Department of Justice with the District of New Mexico's Indian Country Crime Section. In addition to prosecuting all manners of crimes in Indian Country, Thomas Aliberti serves as a tribal liaison, facilitating working relationships with the district's pueblos and reservations through consultation, outreach, and training. Please welcome Thomas Aliberti.
Thank you, First Lady Nez. It is an honor to be here this morning. I also want to thank President Nez, Vice President Leiser, and Second Lady Leiser for the opportunity to present on this difficult but very important issue affecting Indian country. It's efforts such as this campaign that lead to the education and therefore the vigilance in a community to observe and report instances of human trafficking, which can lead to the prosecution of offenders and eventually the healing for survivors. My name is Assistant United States Attorney Thomas Aliberti, and I also want to encourage everyone, in addition to watching this presentation, to take the time to review the other presentations that have been put on as a result of this campaign. Moroni Benali from Restoring Ancestral Winds did a fabulous presentation, and Matthew Holgate from Vanguard University also did a great presentation on Human Trafficking 101 and had a very eloquent message for the youth on the subject. So take some time to review those presentations. I also want to thank Taisha Woods and Sonia Begay for assisting and putting on my presentation here this morning. The name of the presentation is Combating Human Trafficking, a Law Enforcement Perspective. And I think it's important for community members to understand how sex trafficking presents itself in Indian country and the indicia, and hopefully after this presentation, you'll be able to do just that. So, as I mentioned, I'm an assistant United States attorney, and I work in the Indian Country Crimes section of the District of New Mexico U.S. Attorney's Office. In that section, we have 10 federal prosecutors, and the experience of these federal prosecutors includes former state prosecutors, former tribal prosecutors, civil attorneys in federal court, law clerks, and we prosecute cases that come exclusively from the Indian country communities in the District of New Mexico. So that includes the 22 pueblos and tribes here in the District of New Mexico. For those of you who don't know, Indian country makes up about 20% of the land area here in the district, and there are 180,000 tribal members in New Mexico. We're also very proud of the fact that we have in-house victim witness professionals that live and work in tribal communities here in the district and service our victims of crimes. We also have 2 tribal liaisons, of which I am one, and the other is Matilda Villalobos down in the Las Cruces office, who services primarily the Mescalero Apache Reservation. But through this position, we promote public safety through consultation, law enforcement and community training such as this, and outreach. We've done a la carte trainings, which is the best part of my job, on mandatory reporting, child abuse, working with victims of human trafficking in the criminal justice system. And these trainings are designed to educate communities so they become a force multiplier and assist our office in our mission to prosecute offenders and obtain justice for victims in Indian country. The Department of Justice has a trust responsibility in Indian country because they have the jurisdiction to prosecute major crimes in Indian country, including human trafficking. Some of the initiatives, the recent initiatives that have gone on with the Department of Justice include the Indian Health Service Task Force, which was established to protect Native American children in the Indian Health Service. There was an executive order establishing the MMIP Task Force and Operation Lady Justice. This established MMIP coordinators in 13 districts across the country that have Indian country within those districts. We are lucky to have a coordinator here in the District of New Mexico, Denise Billy, who is a former investigator from the Pueblo of Isleta. We also have been working to implement the mandates from the Savannah's Act legislation, which includes training law enforcement, developing protocols such as tribal community response plans to respond to missing and murdered Indigenous person cases. And we've done that in the Pueblo of Poake. We've also met with Navajo Nation to discuss their plan to address these very critical cases. So all of these issues, whether it be MMIP or the Indian Health Service Task Force, they're all related to human trafficking in Indian country. So what is human trafficking? I think it's important to first discuss what it is that we're talking about and how it's defined federally. And it has 3 parts. There's action, there's means, and there's purpose. So you can see, according to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, that the action of recruiting somebody through fraud or force or coercion for the purposes of commercial sexual exploitation or forced labor is considered human trafficking and is illegal. So what are we talking about when we're talking about force? If you're recruiting somebody through physical assault, sexual assault, or physical confinement, or isolation to engage in commercial sexual exploitation that is human trafficking. If you're harboring somebody through fraud or false promises about work and living conditions, use of fraudulent travel documents or fraudulent employment offers in order to get them to engage in forced labor, that is also human trafficking. If you are providing commercial sexual exploitation through coercion, in other words, you're threatening serious harm to somebody to engage in commercial sexual exploitation, as such as threatening somebody's life or the safety of another person or family members, that is also human trafficking. It is important to note that when you are dealing with minors who are induced into commercial sex, they are human trafficking victims automatically, regardless if force or fraud or coercion is present. That's not a necessary element to have an individual being trafficked if they're a minor. I think a major misconception when folks hear about trafficking is that they think that somebody has to move from one place to another in order to be trafficked. And that is not the case. Trafficking happens when one person arranges for another to engage in sex or labor in return for anything of value, whether it's money or food or shelter. If we were prosecuting a human trafficking case federally, there has to be an element where that conduct affects interstate or foreign commerce. But courts have construed that jurisdiction to be very broad, and so it's proven easily. So, for example, if you had somebody engaging just in Indian country in forced commercial sexual exploitation, if that person is utilizing a condom, say, that was manufactured outside the state or outside the country, that affects foreign commerce, and therefore there is a federal nexus there, and the federal government can prosecute that crime. So, in summary, human trafficking is when adults and children are forced to perform labor by force, fraud, or coercion, adults involved in commercial sex by force, fraud, or coercion, and children exploited for sex. So, who can be a trafficker? What does a trafficker look like? How do they present in the community? And a trafficker can be somebody of any ethnicity, any gender, any age. And I think it may surprise some people to learn some of the common relationships between traffickers and those that are being exploited. If you look at the chart, an overwhelming amount according to, or overwhelming percentage according to the Covenant House research, shows that it can be immediate family members by a vast majority, or dating partners, as opposed to strangers. And I think that's a common misconception, that somebody in your immediate family can traffic another individual. A dating partner can traffic you. And during the course of my career, I have seen that. I have seen boyfriends traffic girlfriends for sex in exchange for drugs or money. So it certainly can happen in that way. And I think that's a common misconception, that it's just strangers that are engaging in this activity. So a trafficker can be anyone. It can be a dating partner. It can be a family member. So who are these traffickers looking for to manipulate, to coerce, to force into commercial sex or a forced labor? Who are they looking for? And whether it's a friend, a family member, or a boyfriend, or a stranger, traffickers, they're smart, and they're looking for individuals with vulnerabilities. And I've listed here on the slide some of the targets for traffickers, and traffickers target those they believe will be unable to escape, or unwilling, or too afraid to cooperate with law enforcement. Traffickers look for those they think will be overlooked or forgotten or ignored by society. Folks they see as marginalized. That's who they're going to target. And they target younger individuals because they believe that, they don't have any perspective, no life experience, and it's going to be difficult for that individual who's younger to see through the lies and schemes of the trafficker. One of the greatest risk factors is financial instability. And for example, homelessness is a huge factor, a huge risk factor in somebody being trafficked. And a trafficker is going to see that vulnerability in that individual. For example, in rural Alaska, folks can come to the big city in Anchorage from the village to visit friends or family or receive medical treatment, or escape an abusive situation, and find themselves unable to get back to their village or community. And I think the same thing could happen on a reservation. Or somebody travels to a border town or a place like Gallup or Farmington, New Mexico, and they find themselves unable to get back. And those individuals can sometimes fall into a situation where they self-medicate with drugs and they become vulnerable as a result of that. Sometimes these individuals, they believe that the only way to survive is to engage in sex for money or food. And it creates a significant risk for them to be targeted by a trafficker. So who is a trafficker? Almost anybody. Who are they looking for? Folks with vulnerabilities. And so how does a trafficker manipulate an individual once they selected a target? What are they looking for? How are they doing this? How are they getting them to engage in commercial sexual exploitation? Initially, these traffickers may see this individual in a vulnerable position, somebody who's homeless, and take advantage of that by grooming the individual by acting as if there's someone that this individual who is escaping abusive situation, they can offer protection. They can offer shelter if you're homeless. They are somebody to be trusted, and they can assist this person in getting off the streets. And so initially, I've seen in cases, there is a relationship as if this person is the boyfriend. The trafficker is acting as if they're a loved one, someone that could be trusted by the person being trafficked. Slowly, the trafficker can do things, or quickly, the trafficker can do things such as start by holding on to the individual, their identification, controlling their access to money. They can start doing drugs recreationally and then get that individual addicted to drugs to the point where that individual thinks that the only way that they can satiate their addiction is by engaging in sex for the drug or for money at the direction of the trafficker. If they engage in this activity, oftentimes traffickers will reward them for making money, and they will punish victims for non-compliance as well. But all the while, they are teaching those being trafficked not to trust law enforcement. They're isolating them from their family members, from their community, and threatening or engaging in violence to keep that individual in compliance and making money. So they exploit vulnerabilities, and they condition and intimidate victims to not report, to not trust outside help, and to rely on the trafficker for everything. Sometimes those being trafficked may not even consider themselves a victim. That's how deep the manipulation can go. And it allows the trafficker, because of that deep manipulation and that dynamic, to escape accountability because these victims are not reporting on them because they're terrorized, they're being terrorized, It allows them also to eventually destroy evidence if cases are brought against them. They can tamper with witnesses, and eventually they can flee. So we know that anybody could be a trafficker. We know that there are a variety of ways that they manipulate those being trafficked. We know that they target individuals who are vulnerable. So how does a trafficker recruit individuals? Traffickers will seize any available opportunity to seek out a potential victim, somebody they see as vulnerable. They will seize on that opportunity. And a lot of the time in Indian country cases, you see that this is direct recruitment, that these are in-person tactics at malls or casinos or hotels, bus stops, and increasingly more and more traffickers will recruit online through social networking apps and sites and use the information obtained through these methods to relate to and build trust with the victim in that way. And they can do so quickly. So technology has changed the way that traffickers target and recruit. And without a doubt, American Indian and Alaska Native women are targets for traffickers. Trafficking there's a market for American Indian and Alaska Native women. It can be incredibly lucrative for a trafficker to traffic American Indian and Alaska Native women because they can be advertised as exotic, as Asian, as Polynesian. And traffickers see individuals in tribal communities as especially easy to traffic due to some of the vulnerabilities we discussed in general. So things like prior victimization and also lack of services, lack of legal services, lack of medical care, lack of law enforcement intervention, and also historical trauma. So if for example, a victim has been previously abused, the trafficker thinks, it's going to be easy for me to manipulate this individual. I can gain their trust more easily by showing love. If they've run away from an abusive home, the trafficker thinks that I can easily gain their trust by providing shelter and preying on those vulnerabilities. And that perception that American Indian and Alaska Native women are good targets for traffickers, there is something to that, because what we do know is that if you have been victimized previously, it is more likely that you will be victimized again. And so folks coming from tribal communities, unfortunately, have experienced more violence in their lifetime. They've been previously victimized. According to some studies, or a study by Dr. Andre Rose, 84.3% of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. Half, or more than half, of these women have experienced sexual violence. And 66% have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner. So these traffickers who are looking for vulnerabilities see the prior victimization and will seize on that. So because these vulnerabilities are magnified in tribal communities where resources are scarce and law enforcement intervention may be hours away. So it is a significant issue. So the question now becomes, we know that human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation of children and adults is happening everywhere, including Indian country and Alaska Native villages. you know, what does it look like in Indian country? What does this crime look like in Indian country? And I think it's important to note that the crimes of sex trafficking and human trafficking in Indian country are not going to be on the same scale of offenses in bigger cities. But nevertheless, the danger to the community and the detrimental impact it has on those being victimized is still absolutely significant. And because residents of small towns and tribal communities may be oblivious to the signs of trafficking, especially in these smaller scale cases, it may be overlooked or may not even be viewed as sex trafficking. So what I want to do is discuss some case examples to illustrate what this looks like in Indian country. And I think a prime example is the case of United States versus Jackie Little Dog. It's a case out of the District of South Dakota. Little Dog met a group of immigrant construction workers at a casino and began partying with these individuals. Little Dog started to bring minor females from the community to the house to party with the men, and a minor female engaged in sex with one of the men and received $50 as payment, which was used to purchase gas and food for Little Dog and for the minor female, who informed Little Dog how she had obtained the money. And so Little Dog continued to bring the minor female to the residence, and the female received $50 payment for sex acts, or as little as an 18-pack of beer for engaging in this commercial sex act. So you can see the situation meeting those elements where there's the action and the means to get a commercial sex act. So Little Dog was facilitating this sex act of a minor. There did not need to be force in this case in order for it to be a crime, because this was a minor. And because Little Dog was facilitating this and benefiting from it, they were exchanging commercial sex acts for value. It was a federal crime. And I think it's a perfect example of what this looks like in Indian country. So another example is the United States versus Dustin Morissette. Morissette conspired to distribute marijuana around the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in the District of North Dakota, and he, in essence, recruited individuals for a gang to do this for him that he called the Black Disciples. He used force to coerce an adult female to engage in commercial sex act with others. He used force to coerce individuals he recruited for the gang into engaging in sex acts with him. And he utilized drugs and alcohol to incapacitate a minor to engage in sex with him. Another example of how this can manifest in Indian country is this the type of conduct that you see in a grand scale in a larger city? No, but this is an example of what this looks like in Indian country. So there are some common characteristics that we can list that are consistent with these cases. There are situations where an individual is lured to an urban center by a friend, a family member, a boyfriend, or an unknown individual directly targeting them through social media. This communication between the trafficker and the victim in these cases is often direct, person to person, whether through social media or in person at those shelters, at those walking to school, that sort of thing. And I think an important one that distinguishes a lot of Indian country cases from others is that something other than money, like drugs, may be exchanged for sex. And that was the situation in the Little Dog case. And as has been mentioned before, the victim has a history of prior victimization, which is what a trafficker is looking for. So these are common characteristics in Indian country cases. And as a community member, a medical professional, someone in social services in schools, or just a family member, you may be asking yourself, what can you do to detect a crime such as this, where it happens on a smaller scale? It often happens or is being perpetrated by a family member or a friend or a boyfriend. What can you look for to detect this in your community? And I'm going to discuss some indicators to determine if a community member is at risk or is currently being recruited or exploited through possible sex trafficking. And it's important to note that while no single indicator confirms the existence of sex trafficking, several indicators combined can increase the likelihood that an individual is being exploited or actively being targeted and recruited. Some of these are physical, some of these are behavioral indicators, some of them are environmental and social. And so we'll just address a few of them, starting with physical. A key observation with physical health, if there's an individual that is getting frequent treatment for STDs, if there's weight loss or malnourishment, and any suicide attempts, you can see how if there's just one of these factors, it can be innocuous or it can be an indication of something else. But if you start looking and seeing more and more, it can be an indication that the individual is being targeted or engaged in this activity. And some other things that may present are the fact that the person has no identification or large amounts of cash or prepaid credit cards that can sometimes be used as payment, prepaid credit cards, whether they have bulk sexual paraphernalia such as condoms or lubrication, whether there's evidence of travel, whether they're basically living out of a suitcase or at motels. One of the major indicators is whether the individual has a name or symbol tattooed or burned or branded onto their body. Traffickers will often do that to indicate that that individual's property. It's particularly suspect when it's coupled with that individual's reluctance to explain the tattoo, or when that tattoo matches other individuals. Common tattoos that are used are names or barcodes, or a crown, or names like daddy. These are all indicators that this individual may be engaged in sexual exploitation. Other indicators include things like whether they have ledgers or notebooks or slips of paper that contain phone numbers, dollar amounts, names, or addresses, that they're referencing traveling job opportunities like modeling, or that sort of thing, or if they have multiple cell phones or electronic devices is another indicator. Those are our physical health indicators. So behavioral health indicators can also be present as well, whether they have a significant change in their behavior, an inability to focus or concentrate, whether they're also engaging in increased virtual behavior, whether they have new associates, new groups of online friends that are older, that they avoid answering questions or let others speak for them, whether they appear frightened or resistant or are belligerent to law enforcement, or seem coached in talking to law enforcement, whether they're preoccupied with getting money, or using prostitution terms like daddy, the track, which is an area where prostitutes would walk to get dates with Johns. So all of these can be behavioral health indicators in addition to the physical health indicators. And finally, environmental and social. And I think an important one here for minors is whether they're absent from school, whether they have failing grades, or whether there's a sudden increase in substance abuse, whether there's a change in dress, whether they have an age-inappropriate romantic partner. All of these can be indicators. Of course, no single indicator, again, confirms the existence of sex trafficking, but indicators combined can tell a story that something else is going on here. And if you are vigilant and aware of these indicators, you can make a difference. And there are success stories. For example, a case out of the District of Alaska is United States versus Randall Scott Hines. And this case came to light, and he was able to be prosecuted because there was a medical professional who had been trained by the FBI on how to identify trafficking victims, and noted that a group of women who were coming to the clinic or hospital where she worked that had the same STD, seeing the frequency and number of these individuals clued her in that there may be something else going on here. Eventually, an investigation was initiated, and Randall Hines was prosecuted for engaging in sexual relationships with several teenage girls and supplying them with opiates and methamphetamine. That was prosecuted out of the District of Alaska. And it's an example of where individuals are trained to see multiple factors and put them together. This crime, which is normally hidden, can be revealed. As a former assistant attorney general in the state of Alaska, I prosecuted a case where a hotel worker in a large city where a convention was taking place had observed several women in the hotel who were not dressed appropriately for the weather in Alaska, and that they were being escorted by the same male in and out of a room, and that also there were many different men who were being escorted in and out of that room as well. And so as a result of that activity, she notified law enforcement, and an undercover investigation was initiated, and it revealed a sex trafficking operation that was taking place at the hotel. So whether you're in school, whether you're employed in school as a teacher, or you're in hospitality, or you're in the medical community, being educated on these indicia can help report the behavior and eventually have it investigated, and offenders can be brought to justice. Human trafficking, and specifically sex trafficking of American Indians and Alaska Natives, is a real and significant issue. And it dovetails with other issues such as MMIP and other serious social issues such as domestic violence. And the key here is with increased awareness will come increased vigilance and reporting and increased public safety in Indian country. Those of you who are interested can also take advantage of some of the resources listed here. There's a National Human Trafficking Hotline, Strong Hearts Native Helpline as well, and ISAC, which is a DOJ-funded project of the International Association of Forensic Nurses, and it's a good training source for tribes as well. I'll also note and want to thank Leslie Hagan and Benjamin Whittemore. A lot of this information has come from an article that they wrote that is fantastic, called Combating Trafficking of Native Americans and Alaska Natives. So I encourage all of you to seek that out. Some of this information has also come from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as well. But with that, I thank you all for your time and encourage you to seek out the other presentations during this campaign. And I want to again thank the Office of President and Vice President of Navajo Nation for giving me this opportunity. And again, thanks Sonia Begay for her assistance in putting on this presentation. So thank you very much.